My father raised his glass and laughed. To Sarah, he said, the only person I know who spent 20 years in the military and still came home with nothing to show for it. Everyone at the table laughed. My mother looked down at her plate, pretending she hadn't heard. My younger brother Ryan smirked, my sister Emily actually clapped, and I sat there quietly, staring at the glass of water in front of me. Then my father leaned toward me and said, "Tell them, Sarah, what exactly was your big accomplishment? You took orders?" I looked at him. "For most of my career," I said. "Yes." He laughed again. "See? I told you. Nothing special." He had no idea that 3 weeks later, a 3-star general would walk into that same dining room, look directly at him, and say something that would make the entire table go silent. "Nothing special?" The general paused. "Your daughter saved more lives than you will ever know." My father's smile disappeared. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what the general said next. "Your daughter also knows exactly what you did. 3 weeks earlier, I had arrived at my parents' house after almost 6 years away. I hadn't planned on staying long. My military career had taught me something about family. Sometimes distance isn't measured in miles. Sometimes it's measured in everything people refuse to say to each other. I had spent most of my adult life away from home. Deployments, training assignments, overseas postings, long stretches where I couldn't tell my family where I was or what I was doing. My parents never understood that. Or maybe they simply didn't want to. Whenever I came home, my father would ask the same question. "So, are you finally doing something important?" When I was younger, I used to defend myself, would explain that I had been promoted, that I had led teams, that I had received commendations, that I had served in places my parents couldn't even find on a map. But eventually I stopped explaining, because every explanation gave my father another opportunity to minimize what I had done. My younger brother Ryan had always been the favorite. Ryan was charming, confident, and good at telling people what they wanted to hear. He had started a construction company with money my father had given him. Whenever Ryan made a mistake, my father called it an investment. Whenever I made a choice he didn't understand, my father called it failure. Ryan had never served a day in uniform. Yet, my father proudly introduced him as the successful child. Was always the military one. That's how he described me. Not an officer, not a commander, not a veteran, the military one. The morning after I arrived, I found my father sitting on the back porch. He was reading through some papers. He didn't look up when I approached. "You're staying long?" "A few weeks." He nodded. "That's probably for the best." I sat across from him. "Why?" "Your mother needs help with the house." I smiled slightly. "So that's why you wanted me here?" He finally looked at me. "You've been away for years, Sarah. Don't pretend you're suddenly coming home because you missed us." I didn't say that. "Then why are you here?" I thought about the real reason. My last assignment had ended. I had been offered another position, but before making a decision, I wanted to spend some time somewhere that felt familiar, even if familiar didn't necessarily mean comfortable. I just wanted to come home, I said. My father shook his head. "You were always strange." Then he went back to reading. I didn't know it yet. But those papers in his hands would eventually become the center of everything. That afternoon, my mother asked me to drive her to the bank. On the way there, she was unusually quiet. Finally, she said, "Your father has been under a lot of pressure." "Because of Ryan?" She looked at me. "What makes you say that?" "Because Ryan is always under pressure. Dad just calls it business." She sighed. "Ryan's company is having problems." "How bad?" "I don't know." I knew she was lying, not because she was a bad liar, because my mother had always looked at the road whenever she was afraid to look at me. "What kind of problems?" She tightened her hands around her purse. "Money." "How much?" "I don't know." "Mom." She didn't answer. I let it go, at least for the moment. 2 days later, my father announced that we were having a family dinner. He invited Ryan, Emily, and several relatives. I knew immediately that something was wrong. My father didn't organize family dinners because he missed everyone. He organized them when he wanted an audience. When I entered the dining room that evening, Ryan was already there. He smiled. "Look who's back from saving the world." I ignored him. Emily laughed. "Does she still expect everyone to call her ma'am?" "I never asked anyone to call me that." Ryan raised his eyebrows. "Really? Because Mom told me you used to make everyone stand when you entered a room." "That isn't true." "Relax," he said. "We're just joking." That sentence had always been my family's favorite escape route. "We're just joking." They could say anything, insult anyone, cross any boundary. Then, when you reacted, they would accuse you of being too sensitive. Dinner started normally. Then my father began talking about Ryan's company. "Ryan is negotiating a major contract," he said, proudly. Ryan smiled. My father looked at me. "Maybe you can learn something from your brother." I took a sip of water. "Maybe." Ryan leaned back. "Actually, Sarah could help me with security." My father laughed. "Your sister doesn't know anything about business." "I spent 20 years in the military." "Exactly," my father said. "Following orders." The table laughed. I looked at my mother. She didn't laugh. My father raised his glass. "To Ryan. At least one of my children knows how to build something." Then he looked directly at me. "Some people spend their lives taking orders. Other people become successful." I didn't respond. He seemed disappointed. He wanted an argument. I had learned long ago not to give people the reaction they were looking for. After dinner, Ryan followed me outside. "You really aren't going to say anything?" "About what?" "Dad, what about him?" "He thinks you're a failure." "I know." Ryan stared at me. "You're not even angry?" I shrugged. "Should I be?" He laughed. "You've changed." "No." I looked at him. "You just haven't seen me in a long time." He didn't understand what I meant. That night, I received an email from an attorney. It was regarding a property I hadn't thought about in years. My grandfather's old farmhouse. After he died, the property had been divided between my father and me. My father had always told me that he was taking care of it. I opened the attached documents. Then I read them again. The property was being prepared for sale, and my name was on the ownership documents. I called my father. "What are you doing with the farmhouse?" There was a long silence. "What do you mean?" "It's being listed for sale. We've talked about selling it." "No, you talked about selling. You don't live there. That doesn't mean you can sell it." His voice became colder. "Don't start acting like a lawyer." "I'm not acting like anything. I'm asking why my property is being sold without my permission." "It isn't your property." "Yes, it is." "You haven't been involved in that place for years. That doesn't change the deed." My father hung up. I stared at my phone. Something wasn't right. The next morning, I contacted the attorney whose name was on the documents. He confirmed what I already suspected. The farmhouse couldn't legally be sold without my authorization. But someone had apparently submitted documents suggesting that I had given permission. I asked him for a Abby. When I saw the signature, I immediately knew it was fake. It looked enough like mine to fool someone who didn't know me, but it wasn't mine. I didn't confront my father immediately. Instead, I started looking into everything. The more I found, the worse it became. My father had been trying to use the property as collateral for a loan connected to Ryan's company. The company was in serious financial trouble. If the loan failed, the bank could seize the property, my grandfather's property, and apparently, my father had decided that my years away made me convenient. I called the attorney again. "Do you know who submitted these documents?" He hesitated. Then he said, "Your father's attorney." I thanked him and ended the call. Sat there for several minutes. I wasn't furious. Not yet. I was disappointed. There is a particular kind of pain that comes when strangers betray you. But there is another kind when family does it because strangers don't have to earn your trust. Family gets it for free. That evening, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. You know about the property. It wasn't a question. Yes. She looked down. Your father was trying to help Ryan. By using my property? He thought you would understand. Did you? She didn't answer. Mom, did you know? She started crying. That was when I knew everything. How long? A few months. I looked away. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father said you would destroy Ryan's future. I stood up. My future apparently wasn't important enough to protect. She cried harder. I walked to the window. Outside. The backyard was exactly as I remembered it from childhood. The same tree, the same old fence, the same porch where my father had taught Ryan how to fix a motorcycle. I remembered sitting nearby, asking if I could help. My father had told me to stay out of the way. Some things never changed. The next morning, I made one phone call, not to my father, not to the attorney, to someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. General Mitchell? There was silence on the other end. Then his familiar voice. Sarah. Sir, you don't call me unless something is wrong. I need advice. Tell me. I explained the, situation. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. Are you planning to confront them? Yes. Then don't do it alone. I frowned. What do you mean? I'll be in your city in 3 weeks. Sir, you don't need to. I wasn't asking. He paused. There's something else you need to know. What? Your father has been making calls. What kind of calls? I can't discuss all of it. That sentence immediately caught my attention. But some of the people he contacted know your name. I said nothing. Sarah, he continued, what happened to your grandfather's property may be connected to something larger. What? I'll explain when I see you. Then he ended the call. 3 weeks. I had no idea what he meant. But I knew one thing. My family had no idea who General Mitchell was. They certainly didn't know what he meant when he said that people knew my name. The day of the dinner arrived. My father had invited everyone again. Apparently, he wanted to celebrate Ryan's upcoming business deal. I almost didn't go. Then I decided I would. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth to come out. I arrived early. My father was in the dining room. He looked at me. You came. I said I would. He smiled. Good. Try not to embarrass us tonight. I looked at him. I'll do my best. He laughed. That's all anyone can ask. Guests began arriving. Ryan was wearing an expensive suit. Emily was talking about her upcoming wedding. My mother moved around the room quietly. Then the doorbell rang. My father looked toward the entrance. I'll get it. He walked to the door. A few seconds later, his voice changed. General? The room went silent. General Mitchell entered. He was wearing a dark suit, no uniform, no decorations, no military display. But the moment he walked into the room, I knew my father recognized the authority behind the man. General Mitchell, my father said nervously. The general shook his hand. Then he looked across the room. His eyes found me. Sarah. I stood. Sir? My father looked between us. You two know each other? General Mitchell smiled. I should say so. Ryan laughed nervously. Dad told us Sarah had a pretty ordinary military career. The general looked at him. Ordinary? Ryan's smile faded. My father stepped in. She doesn't like to talk about it. No, General Mitchell said. I don't think she does. Everyone was silent. The general looked at my father. Your daughter commanded operations that most people will never hear about. My father's face changed. The general continued. She was responsible for the safe evacuation of hundreds of civilians during an operation that could have ended very differently. Emily stared at me. Ryan looked confused. My father said nothing. General Mitchell turned toward me. You never told them? I shook my head. They never asked. My mother covered her mouth. Then my father laughed nervously. Well, that's impressive, but we're here to discuss business. General Mitchell didn't move. I know. My father's face became pale. Excuse me? I know about the property. Nobody spoke. The general reached into his briefcase. He removed a folder, then placed it on the table. I also know about the documents. My father stared at it. What documents? The ones submitted using Sarah's name. Ryan stood up. This is ridiculous. General Mitchell looked at him. Sit down. Ryan sat. For the first time in my life, I saw my brother obey an order without arguing. General Mitchell opened the folder. These documents contain a forged signature. My father swallowed. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He looked at me. Sarah, you should know something. I nodded. Your father didn't simply attempt to sell the property. He paused. He used your name to obtain financing. My mother's eyes widened. Ryan looked at my father. Dad? My father snapped. Don't. Ryan stepped back. You said everything was legal. My father said nothing. General Mitchell continued. The lender has been notified. My father looked at me. You did this? No. I shook my head. I didn't notify anyone. The general spoke calmly. I did. My father looked furious. You had no right. General Mitchell's expression hardened. I had every right to protect one of my officers. My father stared at him. Then the general said something that changed everything. Your daughter spent years protecting people who didn't know her name. He pointed toward the folder. And now she's protecting herself from people who know her name very well. My father sat down. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Ryan whispered, How bad is it? The general closed the folder. Bad enough that you should speak to an attorney before you say anything else. Ryan looked at me. You knew? I knew something was wrong. You let this happen. No. I looked at him. You let it happen. He had no answer. My father finally spoke. Sarah. I looked at him. I made mistakes. I almost laughed. Mistakes? I was trying to help your brother. You forged my signature. I never signed anything. You knew about it. He looked away. That was enough. I reached into my jacket and placed another document on the table. My father stared at it. What is that? A copy of the original deed. He looked confused. You don't understand, I said. The property isn't just mine. Everyone looked at me. It was transferred into a trust years ago. My father froze. The trust had been established by my grandfather before his death. My father knew about it. But he had never told Ryan, and he had assumed I had forgotten. The trust had one condition. The property could not be sold or used as collateral without the approval of both beneficiaries. My father had never had that approval. He had been trying to sell something he couldn't sell, and he had risked his own son's company to do it. Ryan stood. You knew? My father didn't answer. Ryan turned toward him. You told me Sarah agreed. My father looked at the floor. Ryan's face changed. For the first time, he understood that I hadn't been the obstacle. He had been lied to, too. The room became completely silent. Then my mother said something I never expected. Sarah. I looked at her. I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. She started crying. My father remained silent. General Mitchell stood. I think I've said enough. He looked at me. Sarah? Yes, sir. Come with me. I followed him outside. We stood on the porch. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, You all right? I looked back through the window. My family was still sitting around the table. I think so. You don't have to forgive them. I know. You don't have to punish them either. I looked at him. I know. He smiled. Then you're finally learning. I laughed quietly. Learning what? That revenge isn't always making someone suffer. He looked toward the house. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let them decide who you are. I thought about everything my father had said over the years. Failure, ordinary. The military one, a woman who only knew how to take orders. For years, I had wanted to prove him wrong. But standing there, I realized something. I didn't need to. The life I had lived already proved him wrong. I had spent 20 years serving people who might never know my name. I had carried responsibility when nobody was watching. I had made decisions that could not be undone. I had lost friends. I had saved strangers. I had followed orders when following them was difficult, and I had come home hoping that somehow my father might finally see me. But he didn't need to. I finally saw myself clearly enough. A month later, the property issue was resolved. The attempted sale was canceled. Ryan's company survived, but barely. My father had to answer questions about the forged documents. Our relationship never returned to what it had been. Maybe that was for the best. My mother and I remained in contact. Emily apologized. Ryan apologized too. I accepted both apologies. But forgiveness didn't mean giving them the same access to my life. That was something I had learned the hard way. A few months later, I received another call from General Mitchell. He offered me a new position. I asked him what it involved. He laughed. Still asking questions? Always. Good. I accepted. Before leaving, I visited my grandfather's farmhouse. I stood on the porch for a long time. The same porch where I had once sat as a child, watching my father teach Ryan everything he thought a successful man needed to know. I finally understood something. My father had spent my entire life measuring success by money, status, possessions, and appearances. I had spent mine measuring it by responsibility. We were never going to agree, and that was okay. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. She had sent me an old photograph. It was from the day I joined the military. I was standing in uniform, young and nervous, with my parents beside me. My father wasn't smiling, but my mother was. Underneath the photograph, she had written one sentence. I wish I had been braver back then. I stared at those words for a long time, then I saved the photograph, not because I wanted to remember the hurt, because I wanted to remember how far I had come. My father had spent years telling everyone that I had amounted to nothing. Then a general walked into his dining room and told him exactly who his daughter was. But the truth was, General Mitchell didn't give me my worth that night. He only reminded my family of something I had already learned. You don't become valuable because someone finally recognizes you. You become valuable because of what you do when nobody is watching. And sometimes the strongest revenge isn't watching the people who hurt you fall. Sometimes it's walking away from them without needing them to understand why.